I'm from Nepal, and I want to tell you about a real incident which happened with my grandmother. This happened many years ago. My grandfather and grandmother used to live in the distant mountain villages of Nepal, and in those days, there weren't many hospitals around, especially for women to deliver children. They would use midwives, but we called them Dais. The Dai would assist the pregnant woman in delivering their baby. My grandmother was one such Dai. She was really good and an expert at her job, and everyone said there was no such other Dai in the entire village as skilled as she was. She was so good at her job that during one delivery, a baby had died halfway through the pushing process. My grandmother knew that that woman was in trouble, and the only way to save her was she needed to remove the fetus in pieces. The woman was screaming in pain and fear, while my grandmother calmly performed the surgery, and after all was said and done, the mother was alive. My grandmother dedicated herself to this job, and wanted to help everyone she possibly could. The incident that I'm about to tell you took place around 50 years ago. It was the rainy season, and it was raining very heavily outside. One night, my grandfather and grandmother were alone in their home, when suddenly, someone knocked at the door. When my grandmother opened the door, she saw a woman standing outside. The woman was asking for my grandmother to go with her for a delivery. The woman standing at the door told my grandmother that she had come from a neighboring village. My grandmother quickly agreed to go with her, as it was not unusual. Many people came at all hours of the night. This was just part of the job. Whenever she would go for a delivery, she would always carry some rice with her and give it to the new mother. This was a special gift because in those days, people used to be very poor, and not everyone had the luxury to eat rice. My granny informed my grandpa that she was going for a delivery. She kissed him goodbye. My grandfather smiled. He would never go with her, but on this day, for some reason, something didn't feel right. After my grandmother had left the home, he decided to follow her. Probably he knew that she was going to get into some kind of trouble. There was just a feeling. Later on, as my grandmother was walking together with the woman, her eyes fell upon her feet. What she noticed was strange. The woman's feet were backwards. Seeing that, my granny started to panic and became very scared. But she didn't say anything, just kept walking silently, cautiously looking at the woman. As they continued to walk, she was completely in her senses, but as soon as they crossed the boundaries of the village, she totally lost control. I mean, my grandmother's brain was still functioning, but it was as if she wasn't in control of herself, almost like she had been hypnotized. She just kept walking with the woman, and no matter how much she wanted to stop, her body just kept moving. The woman continued to lead my grandmother right into the jungle. My grandfather was still following them closely and silently, and then my grandfather saw that the woman was taking my granny into a small cave hidden between two large rocks in the jungle. Inside that cave there was a fire pot and some other materials for what looked like to be a ritual. My granny went inside the cave and sat right in front of the fire pot. She was still not in her senses. She just kept staring at the glow of the fire in the fire pot. And then my grandfather barged into the cave. Seeing my grandfather, the woman instinctively got angry, and right from there jumped onto him and sat on his chest. But my grandfather was young, and during that time, strong enough to throw the woman off onto the floor. The woman looked at him, scattered to her knees, and quickly ran outside the cave immediately. Then my grandpa somehow brought my granny back into their home. She was still unconscious. She remained unconscious for 2 days, And then, on the third day, she opened her eyes. All the people of the neighborhood had gathered around her and started asking her about that night. But then, what my granny had told them shocked everyone. My granny said that the woman was a Chudal, and she had lured her into the cave in order to perform some ritual to increase her powers. For that ritual, she needed a pure soul to sacrifice. My granny had the purest soul in the entire village, as she dedicated all her time to helping everyone around her. The Chudal could sense this, and so she came after her to sacrifice her and would have killed my grandmother, if not thanks to my grandpa, who on that day, for whatever reason, decided to follow that feeling, which ultimately saved my grandmother's life.
Well, friends, how'd you like today's story? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for this channel to listen each and every weekday for more real horror stories. We got a ton of amazing real horror stories, and we're dying to share them with you. So until then, stay out of the dark and stay tuned for our next video.